Anything.
Cool, I'm recording now.
Oh, good. Cool. Oh, well, thank you everyone for coming along. It's great to have you all here, and I'm been really excited about sharing this book with you. When I volunteered to do this, to host this talk, I made it clear that I was no expert. I just have a really cool book that I've just finished reading. And I'm pretty obsessed with it, and my hope is that you all will be by the end of tonight as well. Also, hello to those joining later and viewing it on the recording. It seems like there's a few of you. So we'll talk about the assessment results, and it's great to hear that so many of you have done that. This results sort of split into two bits. There's the rainbow bit, and we'll talk about, and then the second bit is sort of positive techniques that the book talks about, and that's sort of a guideline of what the book thinks you need to know to be good at having difficult conversations. So I'll give you an overview of those techniques, and then we'll put that into context, and then we're going to use the breakout rooms to split into groups and talk through how to approach difficult conversations in Frisbee situations. So the reason why I asked you to do the assessment was so that as I'm talking through the techniques, you'll get to know where your strengths naturally lie, and you'll be able to contribute that to the group discussion. So yeah, take note and don't be afraid to sort of voice where you know your strengths lie when we get to the end discussions. But before all that, I'm going to talk to you about something called the fool's choice. So I'm just going to share my screen. Cool. Let me know if you can see that.
Yep.
There's the book. Cool. So the fool's choice is believing that you have to choose between telling the truth and keeping a friend or colleague or teammate. It's being trapped in an either or box. In effective conversation, you don't let yourself get boxed in with two choices. So the question becomes, how do you tell the truth and keep your friend? And this is sort of how the book begins, talking about this fool's choice concept. For a big part of my life, I fell into the trap of believing the fool's choice. And I found myself sort of constantly compromising small truths to please people. The saying kept ringing in my head, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. And this book is sort of saying that's not true at all. You can add to the pool of knowledge and also keep your friends. So resorting to silence means masking, avoiding or withdrawing, and violence could look like controlling, labeling, or attacking. Here are a few examples where I've succumbed to one or the other. So this is my mum, who I love, but as Mara can attest, she can be pretty pushy, like most mums can. When it comes to sort of keeping in touch and chatting on the phone and coffees and Skypes and this sort of thing, really, really proddy. I remember one weekend where I was already far too oversubscribed, and she was being her beautiful, persistent self and wouldn't stop pushing for a Skype call. You know, what about this time? No, what about after that? Eventually I blew up and I said grumpily that I didn't have time to talk to her. I was upset at her for making me spell out this bad news to her. And I was also annoyed at myself and probably feeling a bit guilty too. So I attacked her with my anger, which was stupid because I made it worse and didn't give her the benefit of the doubt that if I didn't have time to talk to her, she probably didn't want to force me. In this example, Mars said to me that she had heard of the new fashion where you wear your beanie on the outside of your hood. And she asked me if she looked good. I knew she didn't look good, but I didn't want to hurt her feelings. So I said, yeah, you look hot. And she was happy. Look how happy she looks. I resorted to silence until now. Mars, you should stop wearing it like that. So this is all the first part of the assessment results. This is the rainbow that I was talking about. So now's a good time to open up your assessment results if you don't have them open already. We'll go through what they mean. I can hear a bit of a guy talking. Sorry, I don't know who that is. I hope it's not my video already starting.
That's me, I think. Sorry, Becca. I'm just going to mute myself. It's Sim here.
Oh, hey, Sam. Welcome. Cool, yeah.
I'll put myself on mute so you don't hear the TV in the background.
Thank you. Yes, so you're looking at the pointer, whether it's in the green or the red or the left or the right. And if it's further into the red, then you're more prone to exhibit those traits in a crucial conversation. I thought it would be fun to see what sort of split we have in the group in terms of silences or violences. So I've created a little slider. Is that what it's called, Jana? I used your tool from last time.
Yeah.
So I will bring that over and share this link in the chat, and you can all answer. I'm a silencer for sure.
Sorry, Becca, just to clarify, you pick the one that's further towards the red as to whether you're a silencer or violencer?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Interesting. I think that's, oh, another one coming. I think it's not surprising that there's more silences than violences, I think, but that's good to know. Cool. Okay, so that's the first part of the results. Any other questions there? No, cool. So the second part, this is sort of the core part of the book. These are the 7 core principles throughout it, and they're the positive traits. So if you scored 2 or 3 in any of these techniques, it means that you're naturally good at it. So take notes of those for later. I'm going to go through and give an overview for each of these techniques, then we'll come back and put them into context. So the first one is start with the heart. This is where you focus on what you really want, don't get sucked up into the emotions of what you're feeling and refuse to make the fool's choice. A story that is in the book to help illustrate this is where a dad and 2 daughters come back to their hotel after a day at Disneyland. Both girls rush to the bathroom because they need to use the toilet. They argue about why each of them deserve to use it first. The dad tells them that they need to sort it out between the 2 of them, and it takes about 20 minutes before they eventually are in agreement and they've both used the loo. Conversations often turn into winning the argument rather than achieving what you originally wanted, and that's what this technique reminds us of. The next one, this technique is simply about being aware of the person or people you're talking to, thinking about their state of mind, whether they feel safe or unsafe, and looking to see if they're resorting to silence or violence. And it's also being aware of yourself. Master my stories. This is a super interesting technique, and it was completely new to me before the book. The idea is that we all process information through our own lenses. We see or hear something, we tell ourselves a story about that thing, which makes us feel and act a certain way. And I've got a video that helps explain this really well. So I'll just bring that up on screen. And I'll just check that I've shared my computer sound. Yeah, cool. So we just watch, I think it's about 3 or 4 minutes long. We won't watch the whole thing.
When we interact with someone, that experience enters the ladder at the bottom. That same experience zips up the ladder in the blink of an eye, exiting at the top. This process happens thousands of times a day without us knowing it. Let's focus on what happens on each rung of the ladder. On the first rung, we have the raw data and observations of our experience. This is very similar to what someone watching a video recording of our experience would see. Moving up to the second rung, we filter in specific information and details from our experience. We unknowingly filter based on our preferences, tendencies, and many other aspects that we believe are important. Onto the third rung, we assign meaning to the information we have filtered through. This is where we start to interpret what our information is telling us. On the fourth rung, a very crucial thing happens. We develop assumptions based on the meaning we created on the previous rung, and we start to blur the distinction between what is fact and what is story. On the fifth rung, we develop conclusions based on our assumptions. This is also where our emotional reactions are created. On the sixth rung, we adjust our beliefs about the world around us, including the person or people involved in our experience of the moment. On the seventh and final rung, we take action based on our adjusted beliefs. Still with me? Great! Let's take a real-life example and run it up the ladder to see how this all works. Have you ever been cut off in a parking lot, signal light on, as you steer toward your coveted spot only to slam on your brakes at the last minute as someone pulls in front of you and steals your spot away? Imagine that experience and notice all of the data and observations landing on the first rung of your ladder. Now let's watch what we pay attention to on the second rung. Who cares that it's sunny out and the birds are chirping? The 50% off sign outside of your favorite store is meaningless. You filter in the sensation of your grip tightening on the wheel, you feel your blood pressure rise, you hear the squeal of your brakes, and you notice the expression on the face of the other driver as he pulls in front of you and quickly looks away. Time for our third rung. Ever since you were young, your parents taught you the importance of waiting in line and taking your turn. You live and die by the rule of first come, first served. And now this guy has just stolen your spot. What gives? Up to the fourth rung we go. Watch closely as our assumptions take over and our story creates itself. That stupid jerk. Didn't his parents teach him anything? How could he not see my signal light? He must never pay attention. Why does he think he's more important than anyone else? Jumping quickly to the fifth rung, we conclude that this guy is heartless, inconsiderate, he needs to be taught a lesson and put in his place. We feel angry, frustrated, vindictive, justified. On our sixth rung, we adjust our beliefs based on the experience. That's the last time I give in. Next time someone tries to cut me off, tires will be smoking on the pavement as I squeal past them into my spot. And finally, our last rung, we take action. We back up, pull up behind his car, honk our horn, and roll down our window to scream a few choice words his way. Now, imagine, he walks over quickly, apologizing. His wife, who is almost due with their first baby, called him from inside the mall to say she is in labor and needs to get to the hospital immediately. We are momentarily shocked, apologize profusely, and wish him luck as he rushes toward the entrance.
Cool. Yeah, so this technique helps us, reminds us to look at the facts and concrete things we see and hear rather than getting caught up in our emotions. The next technique, make it safe, links to the learn to look technique. When you notice the person you're speaking to is starting to feel unsafe, you can step outside of the conversation and do these things to restore safety. Number one, Apologise when appropriate is pretty self-explanatory. Number 2, contrasting is where you can say where you say both what you want and what you don't want to create clarity for the person. When I was trying to tell my mum I didn't want to talk to her, I could have used contrasting by saying, "Mum, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I would like to have more time to myself this weekend." Or, "Mum, I don't want to talk to you this weekend, but I do want to talk to you generally." Number 3, creating a mutual purpose is a great technique that I think is pretty self-explanatory too. In my conversation with Mum, I could have said, "You and I know that we both want a relationship where we talk regularly." State my path is a technique for reminding yourself during a difficult conversation how to not get caught up in emotions as well. Starting with the facts rather than feelings, you share what the situation looks like from your point of view. Then you encourage others to share their point of view, never talking in absolutes, simply sharing your opinion, saying things like, "In my opinion," rather than "everyone knows that," and encouraging testing, which means encouraging others to have opposing views as you. I think it also brings into play some of the things Janelle spoke about in her talk, creating a safe space where there aren't right and wrong answers per se. And here's a technique that helps you encourage the person you're in a conversation with to contribute more. Firstly, you ask them to share by saying something like, "I'm interested in what you have to say." Then, if necessary, you mirror what you observe of them back to them. Your tone and the way you say that makes it seem like you feel, for instance. Then you paraphrase, summarizing what you understand they're communicating. The last option here, prime, is something that you can use if the person you're talking with is struggling to communicate. This is where you make an assumption about what they might be thinking and speak it out loud to them. It's a bit risky, I think, because if you get it wrong, the other person might close up even more. And lastly, move to action, which is also pretty explanatory, I think, and obvious why it's important. The first line here, "decide how you will decide," is interesting and illustrates something that comes up quite a lot in the book. It's that you shouldn't be afraid to jump outside of the conversation to speak about it, clarify something so that there is a mutual understanding, and then jump back into the conversation. I think people who are good at difficult conversations do this a lot because it helps relieve tension and sort of highlights what everyone is thinking. So it creates this feeling of everyone being on the same page and together. Cool, so that was a super quick overview of the different techniques the book talks about. Hopefully you followed along with your results and you know which ones you're naturally good at and which ones you could work on. Are there any questions about any of those 7 techniques? Cool, I will continue. To get our minds properly into the zone, I'm going to go through the techniques again and talk through how they might look with a specific Frisbee conversation. I'm just going to go through the last 4 techniques as they are the sort of doing action ones. First 3, I think, are more things that you should be working on ahead of the conversation. So this is going to be a bit like here's one I prepared earlier kind of thing. And then we'll break into groups and have a go at doing it together. And as a group, probably do a much better job than the one I'm about to share. But if anyone thinks of anything while I'm going, then please yell out. So the scenario is, as a coach, you must tell a player that they didn't make the team. And I'm going to go through each of those 4 techniques. Starting with make it safe, I say to the player, "I want to let you know that you haven't made the team this year." Adding a bit of contrasting, I might say, I don't want to discourage you from continuing to develop as a player. I also don't want you to come away from this conversation feeling like you don't have a lot of great things to offer as a player. Creating a mutual purpose here is hard, but an option might be to talk broadly about maybe the level of New Zealand's women's Frisbee, and so setting a high bar across the board so people have to rise to it. If it's relevant and I feel genuinely about it, I could talk about a shared purpose to help the player improve and get into the team the following year. Next, I'll go through the state my path steps. I'll say, let's talk about the specific things you could improve on. Actually, before I do this, I should, like Jana said in her talk, I should ask that they're happy to receive feedback, as that's always important. So provided they say yes to that, I say, I'll provide some facts. So you scored bottom of the range of the fitness test and had a lot of drops and throwaways in the double disc drill we did. That, along with what I noticed in the game time, where you were taking a long time to clear after making cuts and turn the disc over 3 times, meant that I've decided to select other players for the team this year. Because I said up front that I didn't want her to come away feeling like she was a bad player with nothing to add, and to create a bit of safety going forward in the conversation, I'll also give a bit of positive feedback and say that she timed her cuts well when she cut, and it was great when she laid out in the end zone and scored that 1 point. That shows a lot of dedication. Now to explore the player's path. And I'm going to jump into the next technique for this, because I think there's a lot of overlap between these 4 things and the last 3 things in the state my path technique. So I'll say to the player, what do you think? Do you feel like I've described your level of skill accurately? This gives the player the opportunity to own the decision as well. Ideally, she agrees and contributes genuinely to what the book refers to as the pool of shared meaning. And that is basically the information passed between people. The more information that is available to everyone involved, the better the decisions made are. Hence, when we move shortly to solving other Frisbee scenarios together, we're likely to do a better job than just one of us, me, solving this scenario. The other benefit of having shared information in the pool of meaning is a shared ownership of decisions. Let's say that the player doesn't seem very open to discussing her performance. She's given permission for feedback, but isn't contributing any observations or feelings herself. Perhaps you notice that she is resorting to silence. Combining some of these techniques, I could say, you seem quiet. Perhaps you feel like I won't take on board what you have to say, but I really do welcome any thoughts that you have. It might not change my decision, but ideally we would have the same view of you as a player, and the way we achieve that is through talking about our observations. At this point, you could also think about what stories the player might be telling themselves in their head. Maybe she's had other conversations like this in the past that are dictating how she views this conversation and what she feels about it. Ideally, she contributes some thoughts on how she played, and she agrees with your decision that she shouldn't be on the team this year, but you agree to help her get in touch with someone who can help with her give her some fitness tips, and she plans on putting a lot of work in for the next season. So, the end. Any thoughts or suggestions for what else I could have done as a coach before we split into groups and dissect another couple of scenarios?
I think one thing that's good to do too is if you have to have those difficult conversations, you try to do that, if not in person, maybe over the phone. And especially when you have to send, news that, cuts and who makes the team and who doesn't. The people who get that email that says you haven't made the team I think the initial impression can be, oh, this is a form letter. It's not, they're not thinking about me as a person. I'm just one of the bunch that they've cut. I know though, as coaches, it's tough because you got to make decisions within a time frame, and you got to announce the team, and you've got to get them all out and wait for people to get back to you and that sort of thing. But I think that, and particularly it probably depends on, who the person is. If it's someone who, made the team every other year, but this is the year that they don't make it, you should have that conversation in person. But if it's someone who's super new and this was their very first time trying out, and they didn't catch any discs, and they're just really, really brand new, and maybe that could be sent as an email, but say, do you want to talk about this, and encourage that face-to-face interaction. But I think that being able to have the two-way dialogue is much better, because if you just send them an email and you cover all those points, you've got your backup, your evidence, that sort of thing, they read the first line and then that's all they see, and based on assumptions and their filtering, it can not end the way you want.
And don't have a chance to even sort of engage in that conversation. Yeah, that's a really good point.
But I like
That's actually a really good point, Jana.
Yeah.
In the past, we've done feedback by email, and this is making me think we should probably have conversations.
Again, depends on who the emails are going to, and I'm speaking from experience, because I sent an email and it's not well received.
The other thing you can do is let people know that you intend to have those difficult conversations, or send the emails at the start, so they can kind of get more time to prepare themselves for it, and just set the expectation that everyone's getting feedback, so they kind of emotionally and mentally can know that's happening.
Yeah,
happen.
And bring the right headspace to the conversation.
Yeah, rather than kind of springing it on.
Yeah, I think it's like Jana said, it's important if you know the players, kind of often you'll know how they like to be given feedback. Some people prefer it in person, some people would actually prefer an email, so it's about tailoring it to the player. And also, like Jana said, if they've been a player that's played every year and made the team every year, and then this is the year that they don't make it, then I think it's really important to have that as a face-to-face conversation, as opposed to a newer player that maybe won't be expecting to make the team, maybe an email.
Yeah, that expectation of the player coming into it is really important, knowing what they are assuming is about to happen.
Well, that determines the difficulty of the conversation. Telling a brand new player that they didn't make, someone who's been playing for a year, telling them they haven't made the New Zealand team is probably not a difficult conversation, because they were just excited to join in with the trials. Telling someone who was on the team last time that they didn't make it is very difficult, because they were expecting to make the team. So I guess that sort of implies that with the more difficult conversations, we tend to think having them in person is probably better than doing it over email.
Cool. Oh, well, we've got two more scenarios here. How many people do we have on the call?
12, including you.
Cool. Maybe I should had more. Maybe we could do 3 groups and then just have a double up of one of the scenarios. Should we do that? So I'll read out both scenarios. So we've got and thank you, Jana and Janelle, for helping come up with these. So the first scenario is talking to a player or co-coach about putting more work into their fitness outside of training. The second scenario is having a conversation with someone who is being disruptive at training. I'll split you into 3 different groups, and maybe we'll do. I think you get told when you get into the groups in the breakout rooms whether you're group 1, 2, or 3. So we'll say group 1 does the first scenario, group 2 does the second, and then group 3 will also do the first scenario. And I'd like you to talk through these scenarios and figure out an approach to that conversation. Use the techniques that we've talked about from the book, but also you should be drawing on other past experience as well. Everyone here it seems like a lot of people have been involved in these coaching decisions, but I'm sure everyone on the team has had a tough conversation at some point in the past. Hence why you join the call, unless you're Chloe and you just joined to see my face. So feel free to add more details to these as well. I didn't want to be too prescriptive. These we're talking to is not an expert at difficult conversations. Imagine they're slightly difficult and that this is a challenging conversation for you. And I've got another slide here so that you can screenshot. And its formatting's a bit off, but if you have a screenshot functionality on your laptop or phone, or you just want to take a photo of that, then that might help when you're in the group discussing to fall back on those techniques. Also decide who will report back to the group afterwards, because I'm really keen to hear all the great ideas. So looks like everyone has finished taking photos. I'll stop sharing and put you into groups randomly. Does anyone need a repeat of the scenarios? Cool. And I think we should do 7 minutes in these breakout rooms. 3 automatically. And if you don't get told which group you're in, group 1, group 2, or group 3, just decide between you what the scenario you want to go with is. Okay, see you back here in 7 minutes.
Hello. Lucky recorded group 1.
Number 1.
Cool. So we have the talking to a player or co-coach about the effort they're putting in for fitness outside of trainings, I think.
Yes, so.
Cool. Did we want to?
Which one?
Did we want to talk through the 4 action ones? We're sort of focusing on those ones, aren't we? That make it safe, state my path, explore others' paths, and I wrote state my path twice. What's the last thing? Move to action.
Move to action.
So, should we go through them in the same order?
Yep. Starting on make it safe.
Make it safe.
What is it? Apologize.
Oh.
What does it mean? Starting with apologize. I don't remember what did she say. But apologizing when
appropriate.
Yeah, is it appropriate to apologize?
I don't think so. Not in this situation.
Yeah, I feel like in this situation, yeah, I guess apologizing is where you feel like you've done something wrong. So we don't think we've done anything wrong, so we'll skip apologizing. So contrast to fix misunderstandings. So what we want and what we don't want. So I guess, particularly in the case of the co-coach, we want to be, we want the whole team to be working on fitness, and to, I guess, as a co-coach, to be setting the example. Don't know if there's something else. Or what's the don't want thing? Don't want.
Anybody letting the team down?
Yeah.
The team depends on everybody. You know, as a team, we all need to work together. We all need to know that we're all working on fitness.
Yeah.
Or on each other.
Yeah, I like that you're stating like the objective of why we play this sport in the first place, which is a team thing. So good to bring facts into it. Yeah,
and maybe don't want to, I don't know, upset's not the right word maybe, or make them feel bad, you know. Don't, like, it's not about blaming them and being like, you're not doing good enough. Well, I mean, it sort of feels like it is, but I guess it's about saying, I'm not saying that I'm not trying to put too much pressure on you, but also I think as a team we wanted to be focused on fitness this season or whatever.
Yeah.
That one feels funny, that contrasting one. I don't know if that's a natural thing for me. And creating a mutual purpose, that's what you were talking about, that team thing. So that's the last part of the making it safe. So the mutual purpose as a team, and we all play frisbee because we want to work hard, and as a team we want to be fit, and we do it for the team.
Yeah.
Cool. Make it safe. Check.
I feel safe.
Should we
reporting back on this? I just thought at the beginning, Becca said, make sure you determine at the start who wants to report back to the group. I might have to take some notes if it's me. That's all.
Oh, yeah.
Does anyone else want to report back?
Desperately.
I'll take some notes then. Hey?
Sounds good.
Thanks, Sim.
I'll forget it.
That's where that was going. Yeah, true. Actually, I think in some of the other ones that's happened, where we come back and someone's reporting back and we clearly haven't taken notes. All right.
I guess state my past feels a bit more natural when I read through it. It looks kind of a natural discussion to have. You share your facts, so I don't know, you could say, yeah, we've noticed with the co-coach or captain that, yeah, you've been, I don't know, how do you turn it? Fitness, it's a bit harsh.
That maybe your fitness isn't where it needs to be. I don't know how frank you'll be.
Yeah. I mean,
so it could be, I guess the facts will depend on the facts that are available. So it might be that we've done a fitness test as a team, or, we were doing something as a team and you scored the worst in the beep test, or we're tracking our fitness training and you are putting the least amount on the spreadsheet that we've got.
Or by end of game of day 2 on Sunday, you look like you cannot keep up with your player or something like that. Yeah. Anything that can show that fitness has been a bit missing.
Yeah. I think with this one it's really easy if you've got, I think you can't keep up with your player. I mean, it could be true, but it's also it's still our perception, which I think is probably more the second one. So tell your story. I don't know, that's my opinion, but if you told me you can't keep up with your player, it looks like you can't keep up with your player, I wouldn't think of that as a fact. I'd be like, that's your opinion, but actually I'm fine.
And they may have been playing in a way, maybe they were poaching off their man on purpose, or do you know what I mean? They may have thought they were being effective by actually not marking their player tightly. Or
Simon, we don't poach here. No joking.
Well, that might be a different conversation.
Very good. Cool. Yeah.
So it says ask for others' paths. So I guess it might be at that point to ask them if they think that they're putting in enough effort, I suppose, or
how do you feel based on the goals we set up at the beginning of the year, whatever, beginning of the season? What do you think already?
Oh goodness.
Oh wow, it's been 7 minutes.
I didn't mean to come back. I clicked the button, but I didn't mean to.
Oh no.
Conversation, and I just left because
Let's continue our meeting here.
So I can still,
Do you need to go back? Do you need more time?
We did 2 of the 4, so I don't know. Hopefully the others did the other 2.
Yeah. What scenario did you do?
Had the fitness one.
We could legit still discuss it here because no one else has joined us.
Yeah, that's true.
And we have Bekah, so perfect. Let's go.
Yeah, so how would you explore others' paths, Bekah?
Well, it would be, I don't know. So you would be interesting to see how that, it ran out of time.
Oh, my bad.
I accidentally clicked the button to return, so we were going to try and continue our conversation, but you all came back.
All at once.
In unison.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, do you want to share what the first two looked like from your group who only got through the two for the fitness?
Yep. So yeah, we only got through the first two. So under the make it safe piece, we talked about mainly we talked about the creating a mutual purpose, and so talking about like this is a team sport, you know, we're all in this together, and fitness is a big part of that. So yeah, that's mainly what we talked about under that piece. And then under the state my path, so talking about sharing facts. So depending on what we've done with fitness, so if we've done fitness testing or something, we might say something along the lines of, we've done, you know, we did a beep test and we noticed that you were the last, you were last in the beep test, or we've noticed that your fitness isn't where it needs to be. We talked about maybe they, you know, at a tournament on day 2, you were starting to tire and weren't able to keep up with your player. Yeah, that's pretty much what I've written down. So yeah, that was kind of where we got to with that.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. Yeah, I guess it's hard to keep to the facts when it's a made up scenario. But that's a good approach. And the mutual purpose is really great as well. You're right. When you've got a team, you all need to be working on the fitness, and it's a really clear mutual purpose. Cool. Who wants to go next?
I can for our group. Just saying none of them are speaking. No. We also had the co-coach, the player needs to improve fitness. So for our make it safe, sort of on the like contrast, maybe I'm not, sort of like explore past, sort of contrast to fix misunderstanding, make it safe, is we just wanted to get their viewpoint on how they are viewing their fitness and what their life is like. You know, if you talk to someone and they're like, oh, like work's been super busy, like I haven't gone for a jog, like I feel real bad about it, then like they're also aware of their issues. Or if they're like, yeah, I've been doing all these new sprint things, and you're like, okay, something else is like going wrong. So just kind of getting their viewpoint to then know how they're going to receive it or what they're going to think about what you're going to say. Sorry, let me get
yeah, that's great.
And then on state my past. So we said, I don't know if I'm falling into the right categories, but we also said about the beep testing, if you have like facts that you can draw on, then yeah, to use that. And then hopefully as a team you would have stated your fitness goals at the start, so then you can like compare them to that and like where you are now. And I also said try not to compare like the conversation person with the receiver, because sometimes that can go wrong. Like if it's like someone, say like Mara telling someone really new your fitness needs work, then they just look and be like, well, why are you comparing me to you? Like I haven't been playing, you know, for that long. So that could be received, sorry Mara to use an example, but that could be received really badly, because it's like, I don't want to be compared to you. Like we're a team, like you're at the top, I'm at the bottom, like we just need to be in the middle to pass.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So yeah, I've been on the receiving end of that, and I'm like, I'm never going to be like you, but you're not the below. So yeah. And then moving to action. So seeing how they are going to receive motivation, or what the team can do for them, and how I think that's it. I've kind of
Yeah,
forgotten.
that's great.
I got very overwhelmed by all the categories. But if Steph or Jana want to add anything else in.
Well, I really liked your good one where you said find out, you know, how they would like to receive information or how they'd like to be helped and what motivates them, because that could maybe determine how you then encourage them and support them to work on their fitness. We're seeing a comparison of sometimes not everyone gets motivated by the selfies after workouts, and you know, some people love it and then they like the sort of peer pressure or, you know, the group aspect of it, but other people, they're just, that's not what gets them going, and that you have to sort of trust that everyone's going to be motivated by what motivates them, but find out what you could do to support them. And if they just need a quick reach out and say, hey, I ran a 5K today, have you done your set this week? Just a yes or no. And if they're like, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow, great, good luck, you know, and just keep checking in with them in the background. And it's fine if they lay low to do it, but keep them supported.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And sort of taking into the consideration, sort of stepping outside the conversation, jumping back in as well. It's sort of, yeah, not being afraid to talk about how that impacts that person.
One thing I was just thinking of too, actually, is the fitness conversation is always really good to have as early as possible, because the later you get into a season, and if you tell someone 2 weeks from nationals, your fitness isn't great, you know, it also makes it, I think, challenging for the player to think, well, what am I going to do in 2 weeks, you know, and just makes it seem like a much harder thing to overcome. So if it's something you can keep on top of, and like Bridge said, you know, you stated in the very beginning that this is going to be a standard for our team and working towards this, you do some, you know, joint testing early, and you just sort of really watch and try to nip it in the bud and stay on top of it, so that the player feels like there is time to correct things and time to work on stuff. And it's not this huge, like, I've got exams, I've got work, now I got to figure out how to, like, you know, improve my fitness over 2 weeks. It's just going to feel like too much to take on. So.
Yeah, that's really good. Part of the planning of the season. Cool. And the last group.
I think I took a few notes. We kind of focused on the context of school coaching with the question of having a conversation with someone who's disruptive at a training. Janelle mentioned a really good point about trying to figure out why they were acting out or why they're being disruptive, kind of asking them to describe their behaviour and then asking them to justify why they're doing that, which I thought was really, really helpful. Priscilla mentioned talking to other people about kind of the advice that they would give, like the person who coached the team that she was coaching before she came on. For me, it would be like bringing along a teacher or a captain to the discussion to kind of have that person who's in a higher authority or knows the student better. She also kind of mentioned that she'd been advised to talk to the team as a whole about setting behaviour expectations and helping them to understand that as a coach, you need the whole team to stay at a certain kind of level of attention throughout the training, rather than singling one student or another out.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's interesting about singling people out and setting expectations. It seems like a pretty core theme coming through in all the discussions. Early expectations, and then making it clear to the whole group. It'd be interesting. Interesting, the idea of addressing the whole group about a problem rather than an individual, and understanding when to do both of those things. I don't have the answer to that, but it'd be interesting to know what sort of, if anyone has any thoughts on that.
I guess if it's not obvious who you're trying to like have your greatest effect on as a group discussion, you know, if it's really obviously one person's being disruptive, and then you're like, hey, like as a group, let's try and keep the noise down, and then everyone's like, oh, like if it's not, if it's not obvious, and you're not going to make the person feel worse for like a trait that they're not aware of or that they can't control, then perhaps no. But if it is something that you've picked up and no one else has, then maybe the group's the way to go, and then you can particularly watch them and see how they're receiving it, or watch like the 3 players and see how it's received in a more casual manner.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I've played on teams where coaches and captains use the group feedback as an alternative to silence. So they're like, I've said it to everyone, therefore I've said it. But by not actually doing the difficult thing, by having that conversation one-on-one with someone, they're actually really just avoiding having the conversation, and the message doesn't get through, because, and it can be in situations like Bridge said, where it's like, you say, you know, let's try and keep the noise down. 90% of the team knows the 1 or 2 people that it's referring to, but they're actually the 2 people that don't realize that they're the ones that are making the problem. So I definitely think there's a right time for both, and I don't answer. Possibly you can try the group option, and if it doesn't work, then you have to try talking one-on-one. But I definitely think that, yeah, the group feedback is used as an alternative to silence probably too often in Frisbee, especially where it's like captains with no coach, and it's really hard to have those conversations and still sort of have some authority and try and keep your place in the team, because you're not a coach outside of the team.
Yeah, I would agree with what Mara's saying. I think it can lose a bit of impact when you address the team as a whole, and also by not singling out one person, you can single out everyone and create a bit of an us and them between, say, the captains and the rest of the team, rather than maybe having that difficult conversation with 1 or 2 players, and that sort of sorting the problem. Yeah, I think sometimes it can be a bit more effective, although more difficult to single people out.
I think having you guys were talking about having your expectations, setting them early with fitness, but also setting your expectations of how kind of closely you need all of your students to be paying attention, how quickly they need to respond to things, and how you expect them to behave in a training setting very early on, rather than kind of just dealing with it as it comes up.
Yeah, that make it safe kind of part of the conversation, I think, can sometimes be done to the whole group. If it's like, apologize for not setting this expectation earlier, but our mutual purpose is to be here and learn, and if people are being disruptive, we're not going to achieve that purpose. And then if the behavior continues, then you have that framework set up already and can repeat it. And it's like, we've already gone through this, but in case you need it again, this is our mutual purpose, and it's your behavior in particular that's preventing that. Yeah. We also talked about coaches being really time poor, and so putting it in like the sense of school coaches like Chris and Amelia are giving up their own personal time when they don't have a whole lot of that, and players are giving up their time to be there and learn. And so it's really disrespectful to everybody who's making that effort for someone to pull away from that focus. The old blackmail feedback.
I think
Still some guilt.
There's also a risk of, if you don't say anything and you don't address the issue, that you actually that affects the players that aren't causing the issue. Like they see the issue is not being addressed. Maybe someone's always late to training. In this case, it's that they're disruptive. Well, if they're going to be disruptive and get away with it, then maybe, I'm going to chat during a team chat as well. You know what I mean? Like they get to a point where they just get frustrated that it's not being dealt with, and then their attention span they start to lose interest as well. So I guess that's could be an issue with not dealing with it.
And the other thing too is that if the coach feels more comfortable saying, hey Sim, what are you doing, and having a conversation with you, and so then deals with it. Then another after effect is like, well, why are you why can I not get away with it, but then the other person can? And so it has to be that equal standard. But it could just be that the person feels more comfortable talking to you, knows that you'll take it well, and so that's a tough one. We've got to treat everyone similar and not
yeah.
And the being late example is a really key one, I think, because it's so easy. As soon as you let it slide with one or two people, then it's all over the place.
I've seen it happen time and time again. Yep.
I really liked Eva's presentation, though, where she was talking about keeping in mind, and I guess this would be the make it safe or understanding where the other person's coming from, is that sometimes being late is because they don't have access to a car, or they've got to put kids to bed before they can come, or and so just understanding where the other person is coming from, and maybe, so I don't know how you could communicate that it's okay for that person to be late, but then not, but maybe just setting that expectation again and saying that we understand life happens, and so if you have a really good reason you can be late, but if you're late you have to do this or something, or back in the day you'd have to run laps until you could join the training. So
I have a rule that kind of, if you have to leave early, it's okay, but you do have to tell me, and you have to tell me, and you must kind of like tell me before you leave, and ideally tell me at the beginning of training that you'll be leaving early, so that everyone can kind of have their own lives, because I know school kids are so busy. Especially at the teens.
We go with 5 burpees for everybody on the team for each person who's late. And it's not like you don't have to explain why you were late. It's just if you're late, everyone does burpees for you. So people know it's not okay, but also it's not like the most intense punishment in the world. Unless you get like 20 people, well, unless you get 10 people who are late, and then there's a lot of burpees.
Yeah, I think that concept of what Eva sort of said as well is, and it's what was in the video that Bekah showed, I think is why it's so important to force yourself to have difficult conversations. Probably less of an issue for people who tend to violence, but given that 70% of us tend to silence, by not having that conversation, you just see that person is late every week, but you have the conversation 2 weeks in. After the second training, they're late. You say, I've noticed you've been late the last 2 weeks. But as a team, we prioritize being on time to trainings. They say, sorry, I have to put my kids to bed every day, or, I can't get out of the house because of whatever, or I don't have a car and I'm walking an hour to get here. And suddenly it all makes sense. And then instead of spending the whole season thinking, oh, that person doesn't even care, they're late to every training, you now have an understanding of why. And you can, and then you might, yes, is the action thing, you'd work out what you're going to do about that. Do you explain to the whole team, this person's late because they don't own a car? Or do you just kind of deal with it in a different way? But you can also kind of work out how much of that information is shared with the team to then, so that they know it's still not okay to be late, but she's going to be late every training. But yeah, I definitely, that's probably in the grand scheme of things quite a simple conversation to have, but it is more so on the more difficult conversations where it gets there's more emotions involved probably. I definitely have in the past been on both sides where the conversation wasn't had, and then right at the end of the season you talk about it or you give feedback, and suddenly everyone understands why there was so much tension throughout the season, but it's kind of too late at that point.
Yeah, it's a really good point, to sort of assume that everyone's coming from like a reasonable place. So if something happens that you think is a bit odd, someone's late or someone's creating tension at training, assume that there's a reasonable reason and have the confidence to have that conversation, to give them the opportunity to explain themselves.
Yeah, because I really like, Steph, how you mentioned, getting them to sort of initiate the conversation and share their perspective first a bit, because that could really save you the embarrassment and awkwardness of, reaming them out for something, or saying your fitness isn't up to par, and them saying, well, I run sprints every day, you know. And so, you know, if they admitted that first, then you could say, well, what kind of sprint, you know, like, let's dig into this a little bit more, and maybe we need to work on that, instead of just slamming them down, and then, or finding out that they can't run sprints because they're visiting their grandmother who just died, you know. And it's just like, oh God, I'm sorry, of course not. So I think getting all the information before you make your decision, you know, your own filtering and your assumptions. And we all sort of have an intention going into a conversation, but I think until you know the full story and the full details from their side too, that you don't actually know what the conversation is going to be yet. So getting that as soon as possible in the conversation can save embarrassment and awkwardness within it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that you don't know what the conversation necessarily is going to be because you don't have the information up front. Cool. Well, it's 5 minutes over, so unless anyone has any other questions or thoughts to end the night on, I will wrap up. Cool. So again, a little sales pitch for the book that I have no actual investment in, but I just think is great. I obviously have given you an overview of what I felt really stood out to me, and I identified with and thought was important. But if you read it, you'll find other things that wow you, I'm sure. You're welcome to use my hard copy after Janelle's done with it. And thanks for joining.